Hey everyone. Today's video I'll be talking about the first season of House of the Dragon. I was a big Game of Thrones fan. It was one of my favorite, if not my favorite TV series until it fell apart. But I know I was hesitant about this prequel. With how Game of Thrones ended, I didn't really have high hopes for the show. And to be honest, like I still am still upset with some things, which I will, at least one thing which I will explain in this video later on, but I'll just say one thing still leads to the end unless they redo the last season or last couple of seasons or last season of Game of Thrones, but I highly doubt it. But House of the Dragon, if you have not seen the show at all or haven't seen all the episodes, please go watch please go watch the whole season before coming to this video because it will be spoiler review. And to be clear, I am a book reader, as you can see, but I do know where the story eventually ends, but I won't give any book spoil. I won't give any books. I won't give any book spoilers in regards to the show, except for maybe to where the show is at this point. But I will mainly be grading or reviewing the show based off the show itself, and not how it relates or how it is versus the book. Because even though there are similarities, but the TV show and the book are two different mediums with considerable differences. And to be clear, the book is told from the biased point of view of a maester, which, as some of you may know. Well, I won't get into that. Sorry, but some of you may have an idea, but I won't go into it. But let's just say it's not a completely kind view of the Targaryen family. I think the first season was good. I don't think it was as good as Game of Thrones was, at least at its height, at its peak. But I think, on its own, it was good. Like, it's not, obviously you could watch this show without having watched Game of Thrones, I think, at least in some ways, but you get a better understanding of at least the Targaryens if you maybe watch Game of Thrones, if you watch Game of Thrones in regards to Daenerys Targaryen and Aemon Targaryen. Jon Snow obviously, has, his Targaryen blood and everything, but I think he's more of a Stark than a Targaryen. But, as he said, but he's both a Stark and a Targaryen. But anyways, the first season is like setting the seeds up for the eventual war the show will encompass mostly. As the show and the books, the Game of Thrones. The show Game of Thrones and in A Song of Ice and Fire books, you don't have to read this book in order to know what will happen eventually. But I'm not going to get into that because I think some people still don't know, because it's only briefly mentioned like once in the show and a couple of times in the books. And I'll be honest, I can't remember everything about the books, but I still think this show is still good on its own, and you'll still be surprised because there are some things in the show that are, like I said, are different from the books. This show, is pretty good. Like, it has, a few characters that are really, have your main and supporting cast that are, pretty good. They really portrayed their characters well. You have like this, it's a lot of gray areas in the story, which is good because Mr. Martin really does love like great characters, and he finds them more interesting. And trying to find finding complexity in like fiction is good because I think it makes you think in some ways, and it's not always cut and dry, which that's something that's Mr. Martin, like it does, but unfortunately not everything with Mr. Martin. I think like in some regards to what he does, I do question. But now the show, I think like it starts off pretty well because obviously, like I said, it's a setup. This first season is a setup for what will eventually happen in the series. You're introduced to your main characters, Rhaenyra, Alicent. Otto, Viserys, Kristen, of course, Rhaenys and Corlys. Quite a few characters. And I know we have their individual personalities and how they fit into this time within Westeros and how it leads up because of course this is the story of eventually the rivalry and like the conflict between the blacks and the greens. But it's more than just that. It's more about these individual characters and their storylines, which I think is good because it fleshes out some characters more than others, or at least it fleshes them out in ways that will surprise you because, like I said, the show does give, and as I said with the book, it's a biased view of the Targaryen history in Westeros and some other people as well. I believe mostly the Targaryens, but we see that these characters aren't cut and dry. There's complexities and gray areas. Let's start about the characters. Of course, we have Rhaenyra, the main protagonist of the show, or one of the main characters, if not the main character. But obviously you have her and Alicent. But I'll get into Alicent in just a bit. But Rhaenyra, is the leading lady in the show. She lives and acts in opposition to the patriarchal society that is Westeros, or at least most of it, anyways. Obviously, as we see through the show, men and unfortunately some women add to the idea and belief that women shouldn't rule. I mean, even when declared the heir to the Iron Throne and having oaths spoken by lords and ladies, even though obviously some didn't want to do it, but Rhaenyra, she lives as a person in as I said, in opposition to patriarchy. She's a woman who is and should be queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and she acts in ways that kind of society doesn't like. Not just to her being the true ruler, but she in societies like these, they don't like women being confident. They don't like them being powerful. They don't like them, obviously, as it comes to the point with her children. They don't like women being promiscuous, and in the sense the multiple children she has with her bastard children. But society like this, as it was mentioned on the show, men can, well, I think it's still frowned on. Men can obviously sleep with multiple women, but women cannot be promiscuous. We see this in regards to people, hating on Rhaenyra for, and just enjoying, sex. But obviously this is the sexism and misogyny that's prevalent within not only the society of Westeros, but our society as well. Even though women are leading the fight to bring down patriarchal beliefs and everything, but there are still people who are hating on Rhaenyra for what she does. In regards to her having bastard children as the whole succession thing, I mean, I can't and wouldn't say she shouldn't enjoy what she enjoys and being with who she wants to be with. It's just in regards with Laenor. I mean, even though I think she acknowledges they did try, it's just if maybe I guess they could have tried to have tried as best they could. I mean, as they did, but possibly tried to have a kid of both their bloodlines, but that's not it's not evil for it was not obviously Laenor. He was not interested in women, so it's obviously so it's obviously a bad thing for both of them, because even though they do love each other in a friend way, obviously it's not a loveless marriage, but it's obviously the circumstances were not great for either of them. But Rhaenyra, has a lot of things, or in regards to how people view her in the society, stacked against her because, as we saw in episode 9, we saw the lords of the small council have been plotting against Rhaenyra and to have Viserys' son Aegon on the Iron Throne. Much to Alicent's shock and horror, well, in a sense, like of what they plan to do, to do to Rhaenyra and her family, but we see that Rhaenyra, is in some ways a tragic character because she is a woman trying to do right in society and in her own way. Well, in the sense, like, regardless of what people agree with, her private choices or not, she is wanting to do things to change things as her, I guess, I found kind of iffy conversation with Rhaenys in regards to a woman ruling, in the sense that, her casting aside what Rhaenys said, but she is trying to change things for the better, but the forces at work are stacked against her, or the ones who have power in King's Landing, and of course their allies. Now to Alicent. Oh, poor Alicent. I know that people said she was a villain, and I, had obviously had fears because, obviously I've read the book. But Alicent, I was pleasantly surprised with her character. She's not a villain. I think she's misguided in some ways, and she was forced into certain positions. But she's not a villain. She's not evil. She had a genuine friendship with Rhaenyra, and unfortunately, what her asshole father forced her to do in regards to marrying Viserys, and like the splitting up that friendship with between her and Rhaenyra, which it was like eventually with episode 8, it had the start of healing, but Alicent, she's I think one of the most, if not the most, tragic character in the show, because she was like put Otto as Hand of the King, and I think I will be clear, I have read watched inside the episode to like each of the episodes of the first season, so I know what the creators and writers and everything of the show had in mind for the characters and their actions. But Otto, he thought what he was doing was right, but he didn't see all the things he was doing wrong. He literally forced the relationship between Alicent and Viserys, and was splitting her friendship with Rhaenyra. And Alicent didn't want that. She and Rhaenyra were great friends, and Alicent, was in such a shitty situation. She was just doing her duty, even though she did not want to do it. Like girls and women in these positions are forced into all kinds of terrible positions, and for like Alicent, like I think at least we saw that even though she hated like having the relationship with Viserys, through time though she grew to love him, which I think in some ways kind of like, as you've seen like Game of Thrones, the whole relationship between Ned Stark and Catelyn, where it wasn't like out of love, but they eventually grew to love each other. Of course, that's another. Of course, Alicent, wasn't Alicent, in some way, is obviously in other ways was more tragic and heartbreaking for her, because she had no interest in Viserys, and Otto was literally forcing her into doing this. Obviously, Catelyn, was forced to do what she did with Ned, but I shouldn't say but, but the whole thing with what the Starks say about butts. with Catelyn, she did love Ned, even though she had the issue with John, which was really a really horrible thing about her. But with Alicent, she was genuinely someone who, I think people have painted as a villain and does not deserve it. She was put in this position that she had no desire or interest in. But she did what she could with it. But with her her father, what he was doing, making her do, and all the pieces he was trying to push into place. I mean, and Alice, obviously there was the whole thing with her and that girl who was assaulted by her son Aegon, which wasn't a great thing for her. Obviously, she gave the lady money and everything, but her son is what I'm saying. He's an asshole, and he does that to women with no remorse at all. I mean, even if he had remorse, still what he did was still awful. But and obviously it's the whole mother protecting her son thing, which I mean she's in this shitty situation with her family. Some of her family, at least, are monsters and assholes, and she's just trying to hold it together and obviously she breaks, and she breaks when she finds out her son Aemon had his eye cut out, and she tries to cut out one of her sorry, I can't remember which son she tried to cut the eye out of, which obviously was a really horrible thing for her to do. I mean, obviously, I know she was trying to avenge her son, and it was her breaking point. But she literally tried to cut out the eye out of someone, which would have likely killed him, because she wouldn't have done it surgically at all. She would have just stabbed it, or like they did. But maybe it was Lucerys. I think it was that one. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. But that point was like her lowest point, where she literally would have more than likely, if not definitely, murdered Rhaenyra's son, and cutting Rhaenyra. It's like things like this that are really just really sad with how we see these characters. Alicent, she is just positioned in such a way that was just so awful that she was eventually, unfortunately, most likely going to break, and she does break in a way that would have really just scarred her, made, as she had remorse, for what she did. I mean, she realized what she would have done if Rhaenyra had stopped her. But no, I mean, other than that, and the thing with the poor girl who was assaulted by Aegon, no, Alicent isn't really a monster. She's just a tragic character who is so misguided and tangled up in what her family has done. She's just trying to hold things together, and she's just trying to do what she can to make everything right, because she literally fights for Rhaenyra in episode 9 to keep her and her family alive, which is a great credit to her, because even though she was trying to get her son Aegon onto the throne through a misunderstanding, and misunderstanding I'll get to later, but no, Alicent, she does things like with Rhaenyra, like protecting Rhaenyra and her family from Otto, her own father, and the council, and most of the small council, except for Lord Beesbury. Rest in peace to him. She does good and honorable things. It's just the situation she's in is just so messed up, and she has been forced into these situations for so long, and she's had little to no autonomy and say in the matter. She's in some ways, at least, she doesn't know what to do. But no, Alicent, I think Alicent, I'm not against Alicent I'm against like her father and his allies. It's just, and of course, I support Rhaenyra, because not just because she's the true heir to the true ruler, but because of what she's fighting for. And obviously, at the end of the season, what happens with Lucerys, she tried to be peaceful in regards to trying to hold together the kingdoms, because originally she was wanting like battle and glory and everything, but through what she goes throughout this season, which I think the whole time skip thing kind of messed me up sometimes, and for things we didn't see with her and the other characters, but her through her conversations with her father and experiencing life as a princess and seeing what people do in power and everything, or at least some people do. Her trying to keep peace, trying to preserve peace. It was a credit to her. It's just what happened with Lucerys and Arrax. Well, specifically for her, Lucerys, we know what's coming. I'll briefly mention her bastard sons. I think they have an understanding of their position in life and the controversy they live in. They're trying to make the best of it's not saying necessarily bad, but well, I guess bad, bad in some ways, but they're trying to do what they can. I mean, or at least Jaehaerys is now, rest in peace to Viserys and Arrax, but it's just the tragedy of the situation that they or he's in is just leading to as you know what will happen. I only briefly mention them because to me, I wasn't as interested in them. Like there's certain characters. There's only a few characters in the show that I'm really interested or hoping for. I think because like they didn't give us like as wide a cast as Game of Thrones did. Obviously, Game of Thrones for me, you had Jon Snow, the Starks in general. Also, Daenerys, and, Tyrion and Jaime. This wide cast of characters, but unfortunately, with House of the Dragon, because of its smaller cast, you don't have as many characters you might be as invested in. Which is understandable. But anyways, to the other characters, Viserys, he was, he's not malicious or evil, but like some of the things he has done, specifically what he did in the first episode of the season, with regards to Emma, he sacrificed her. The whole thing with giving birth in this season has just been awful. It's hell for women. I've seen some people like mock it and everything, which is really infuriating to me, because how they completely cast it aside because they say it's just fictional. Well, this has happened and still happens. It's pure agony, and unfortunately, some women don't survive it. And rest in peace to Emma and Lena in this, because they both went through, and Rhaenyra, they all went through hell, and only one survived it. Oh God, those were just so awful to watch. And yeah, Viserys, he just wanted a son so badly. He sacrificed his wife for one that didn't even live very long. And Viserys, if I'm going to, I think I do have to give credit where credit's due. In the episode when he walks to the Iron Throne, he's lost parts of his body. He's been rotting from both inside. He walks to the Iron Throne in just pure agony, and he does not have any help except for Daemon, and I'll get to Daemon later. He walks and sits on the Iron Throne in just pure agony, and and a lot of people wouldn't be able to do that, but he does it to protect Rhaenyra, which is a credit to him. I won't say that it's not, because I know, because there's a lot of people who would not be able to do that, or wouldn't want to, or couldn't be able to do it, in the sense that because of agony, not everyone can like endure pain in the same ways. But him being able to do that for his daughter, is a credit to him, and him willing to cut out Damon's tongue for what he says. I mean, I know the whole thing. I don't know if he should. I don't necessarily think he should have died for that. But what he called Rhaenyra. No, that's not something you should just. That's not something you should be able to say and not have any correction for it. Now Viserys, he was a complicated character. He's really great character because he did shitty things. One majorly shitty thing in regards to his wife and the whole indecisiveness in regards to what happened with his son Aemond. But doing what he did to protect Rhaenyra in that throne room, was a credit to him. And I guess rest in peace to the character. It's just he was a character that I didn't really like, obviously specifically because of what he did to his wife. Because that was obviously one major awful thing that happened. I mean, he was didn't want her to die, but him basically just, I think they said that she was going to die regardless, but to make her go through that, was just awful. But yeah, he did what he did for Rhaenyra, so credit where credit's due. But back to Rhaenyra and Alicent, which I should have talked about before. The conflict between them, it was such an unfortunate tragedy. Them being split apart by the choice, by the actions, by the men on their lives, and misunderstandings of what happens with them. Because Alicent didn't want to marry Viserys, and Rhaenyra, what she did in regards to wanting to be with or sleeping with certain guys. I mean, these were two really good friends, and they're just split apart by what happens in their lives. And you could tell they were really great friends. But having this conflict happen, it was just so hard to watch because these were really two good friends, and through things that were not malicious or evil in intent, they still, as we see later in the show, they still do care for each other, because episode 8, that friendship was starting to heal, and we could see them really wanting to be friends again because of how Rhaenyra acknowledges and shows respect for Alicent, and Alicent acknowledging what has happened, and her trying to mend what happened, and through whether or not the whole thing of what she wanted her son on the throne, not as bad or not, she protected Rhaenyra as best she could, and she did. And we could see in the last episode with Rhaenyra getting that page that was cut out in the first episode, shows that she does still care for Alicent. She wants that friendship to stay, to heal, go back to the way it was, or even become stronger because of what's happened. But it's just seeing friendships broken, especially friendships like that over things that had no intent, or in the sense of neither character not having really any blame for it. It's just, I know people blame Rhaenyra for her wanting to be with people, but I don't think was really. I mean, although she did say in the sense I swear on her mother, I think. I'm trying to remember that, but now Rhaenyra and Alicent, what they had was good and genuine, and just the conflict that occurs and them starting to mend it, but with Lucerys' death, I think we all know that's where that's more than likely going to lead. I mentioned her earlier, but I think Rhaenys, to me personally, was one of the best, if not the best character in the show. Or as I said, at least one of the best, because she brings a lot of wisdom and understanding into the world. I mean, in the sense that she didn't fight for her rightful place as the ruler of the seven kingdoms, and and the whole argument of her not no for not her putting down trying to well, it's more like a warning to Rhaenyra, but in the sense that with her not doing anything in regards to men, not letting women have power, or her not fighting for it, is complicated. But and the whole episode 9 where she bursts through the ground with her dragon Melees and kills a bunch of civilians. Other than those conflicts, obviously with the killing the people is obviously a major thing against her. But her like speaking for Rhaenyra, for Rhaenyra trying to keep peace, but also for her trying to fight for her, showing this kind of wisdom that she has, and speaking to Rhaenyra and her husband Corlys, whose ambition led to so much death, including for their children. She has like this. She sees the world in grays in ways the other characters don't, because of the tragedy of her not getting her rightful place. She sees how some people in power, whether they have good intentions or not, are leading things towards a bad or tragic way. Her siding with Rhaenyra, willing to literally take up arms against the Greens, is really speaking to how powerful of character she is. Not just because she's a Targaryen and dragon rider, because of who she is as an individual, and her willing to right wrongs and try to help another woman who is in a place that she wasn't originally, to make things go a better way, is really telling for who she is. Okay, to Daemon, I'll do the good and then the bad. The main good thing that he did was helping his brother up onto the Iron Throne and crowning him, which was a really touching moment for them as brothers. But also him really loving his family. I mean, obviously he saw Viserys as weak and trying to use Rhaenyra for specific ends, but he did in his own way love them, and he didn't want them to come to any harm, which is I'm really going to say, which I'll come to in a second. You see that he really cares for his family, but he does a lot of bad stuff. I mean, the whole butchery that happens in King's Landing, because even though they said these certain people were certain things, specifically rapists, which you don't really even know if they really are or not, because there's no whole. Maybe they were, I don't know, but like with thieves, them having their hands cut off was just awful. I mean, you have no idea why that person was a thief. Maybe they were trying to feed themselves and or their families, because some people can't. A lot of people for being thieves, because they can't get work and they're having struggling, just trying to live, and they're wanting to keep their loved ones, happy and healthy as best they can. But no, that was just one. That's just the first thing that we saw. And then another horrible thing is what he did to his wife in the Vale. I mean, that poor woman was just. He was going to leave her paralyzed, and after she. Sorry, certain things like that are just so infuriating me. Obviously, I hate violence against women, and that's not to boost me up or anything. It's just him doing that to her, and what he does to Rhaenyra in the last episode with him choking her. Those things just made me hate him for what he was doing. I mean, I know he's Mr. Barton's favorite character, but obviously in the books he's not fully, obviously understandably fully shown like he is in the show in some ways, because there are differences. But in the show, I don't. Daemon's not one of my characters I really like. I mean, I know he supports Rhaenyra, and he was there for her, when she learned of her son's death, and was there for his brother when he was climbing the throne. But I mean, I know he's supposed to be, a great character, but some of the things he has done is just so just is just so awful. I mean, you have other evil characters, which I'll just get to in just a sec. But he just, I mean, I don't personally like him. He's not a character I really like personally. But I mean, I guess you could. I know people. I guess you could say in some ways he's a compelling character or something. I know some people really like him, but no, personally, I'm not a fan of him. But he's not the only one who has done awful things. I mean, you've got Otto Hightower, Clubfoot, Carl, and Kristen Cole. Those are three guys I really hate because Otto, I think he thinks that what he's doing is right, but he forced his daughter into a marriage that she did not want, and he was willing to slaughter Rhaenyra and her family to ensure Aegon did not have any challenge to his place as king. And you have, Clubfoot Carl, who literally murdered his father and brother for greater power and position, in his life. He was obviously people don't suspect him like they do with Littlefinger, because there's a whole thing about calling him like middle finger or crooked finger, but no, his like he did what he did to his family with a smile on his face, and I mean he killed them, and I mean I guess there's no like I don't know if there's really any kind way to kill someone, but he did it in such a horrifying way, and he enjoyed it. It's just, and how Allison, didn't like speak on what he did, but I guess maybe she was like, I think she was afraid of him, which obviously women, some people, not just women, people, if they're afraid of someone and they know they've done a horrible thing, they're still like afraid of, if they speak or if they try to speak, something may happen to them or someone they care about. But and Kristen Cole, the guy who people, the whole, as you know what he does in the book, but his hatred for Rhaenyra, for her not wanting to be with him, in the sense like going away, and his misogyny comes out, is just I can't. He's one of the, like I said, one of the like characters I can't stand, because while he does no violence towards women, but him speaking about Rhaenyra in that way is just sickening, because of how low he views her, because she did not want, because why? Because she didn't want to like leave behind her life and what she was going for just to be with him. No, he's just characters like I've just mentioned are assholes, and I just can't stand them. I mentioned this earlier. Viserys talks to Rhaenyra about Aegon the Conqueror's dream. Oh God, was I so irritated when I heard that. The whole thing that D&D did with the White Walkers and the prince that was promised, just literally just shedding on the whole storylines for both of them, and then pushing this in the prequel, it just leads to nothing unless they redo at least season 8 of Game of Thrones. It's not worth anything. I mean, the whole thing with Arya killing the Night King. I mean, I don't think she shouldn't have killed him. I had no problem with her like killing a White Walker, but she shouldn't have killed the Night King, because someone like, I have my own ideas about that, but I may go into that an eventual Game of Thrones video or videos. But no, whole storylines and prophecies with the prince that was promised and the White Walker storyline was just completely worthless because of what happened in Game of Thrones. and them pushing this in this prequel, it's just it's just pouring salt in the wound of just how this whole how the whole thing of how Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire started doesn't mean jack. This was specifically shown in the last episode, but it was hinted at by Viserys, that the whole thing about the Targaryens controlling dragons isn't true. I mean, we see in episode 10 how Arax and Vhagar act as individuals, as their own individual beings, because I know some people don't see this or realize this, but animals aren't mindless. They don't necessarily think they don't think as like humans do, but not against other animals, but in this case specifically dragons. Dragons are highly intelligent animals. I mean, and they have their own individual personalities, and what they do, how they interact with people, or specifically the riders, is based on the relationship that is present between them. It's like any animal. If an animal acts in a way that, in the sense that is not, I guess you could say, isn't necessarily against you, is based on the bond between the person and the animal. For animals, it's based off trust and respect. And I'll say this, like, people think, I guess, in the sense that we control dogs, in the sense like we have total control over them. But I think dogs, like dragons, are how they interact with people, is like based off the relationship and how the animals view people. And what the dragons do is based off their own individual experiences. Like Arax defensively attacked Vhagar, and Vhagar killed Arax because of what Arax did. Aemon was just trying to scare Lucerys, but the dragons acted out of their own volition. I mean, Aemon and Lucerys were trying to get their dragons to do certain things, but the dragons aren't mindless. They reacted instinctually and or intellectually in their own way and into the situation. Arax was just trying to get away, and the animal in the dragon's mind, how to do that was to blast Vhagar with fire to stun the larger dragon and get away. And Vhagar, being pissed off, kills Arax. And as Daenerys says in Game of Thrones, the dragon is not a slave. And even though the Targaryens didn't really, or some of them didn't view the dragons that way, dragons are individual beings and they act in their own way. And they will not. You don't have 100, and whether you're a Targaryen or you're average, or whether you're a Targaryen or someone else, how you interact with an animal, you cannot expect the animal to do 100% what you want them to do. An animal is its own individual being. But I thought that was a at least somewhat understandable, if it's still tragic event. Seeing this, I know people have talked about this in the sense the whole, as I mentioned with Daenerys, what she said about dragons and how the dragons acted, but I thought that was a point that should be brought up. There are certain scenes in the first season I thought were obviously were very defining, like Alicent when she wears green. As Clubfoot says, high towers use green as an emblem or sign of declaring war. Alicent, what happened? She arguably was betrayed by her friend, and she was upset about how Rhaenyra was acting towards her after what happened after the engagement of Viserys and Alicent. I mean, that's the obviously main point of where the friendship broke, and obviously Alicent was hateful towards Rhaenyra after that. Well, Rhaenyra and her family, but that was a specific. And no, I'm not wearing this because I support the Greens. This is just something I got. I just realized that now. Sorry, but no, I don't support the Greens. I should have realized this when I wore this. So sorry about that. I'll put it in the description that no, I do not support the Greens. So I'm sorry. Damn, I'm such an idiot for that. But No, to another scene. When Rhaenyra is declared heir, having a woman as a ruler was a complete shock, to the kingdom. I mean, you see parts in this scene of people being uncertain about declaring it, speaking an oath to loyalty to Rhaenyra. It's most prevalent with, I believe, Borman Baratheon when he is very hesitant, but does swear an oath. I know some people um, talked about the Stark when he gives his oath, but I don't think that was in like regards to him like not wanting a woman to rule in this, because Starks are supposed to be like stoic and grim and everything, and I think the actor, how he portrayed the character, I think he was, nothing against him, but I think he seemed more. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he didn't want a woman to rule. Maybe, I don't know. It's just I didn't get that feeling from him. I just think he maybe incorrectly acted in the sense of how a Stark is truly like. But I think that was like one of the main defining scenes of this season. Obviously, because this is one of the main. This is the first main catalyst of the season and what's to come. And another point is when Rhaenys and Meleys intimidate the Greens. Obviously, Rhaenys and Meleys kill a bunch of civilians, which is awful. Still, when it comes to her specifically targeting the Greens, I mean, she could end the whole thing there. I mean, what happens afterwards could be prevented by her just killing them all, but she doesn't, because some of those people there, are her family. I mean, she may hate some of them, but they're still her family, and her not wanting to kill them, in a sense, is her, like, speaks to her as as somewhat merciful, because she doesn't want to, what she would see in her eyes as murder to people who, because some of those people, up there with Aegon, haven't had nothing to do with the whole plot against Rhaenyra and everything. In her family, it's they just people at the wrong place at the wrong time, and she understands this. I mean, obviously it would have prevented what happened and what's to come, but it's her not wanting to outright murder some people who she's known for specifically maybe they're all their lives or most of their lives, like shows like a degree of like compassion on her part. But obviously the whole civilian thing was obviously really bad. Now I don't know if the scenes talk about a whole lot, but it's personally probably my favorite scene in the show is when Rhaenyra sees and is acknowledged by the White Hart, the White Stag, in European culture and in Westeros before the dragons was a symbol of royalty, and Viserys and his allies thought that the White Hart being there was a sign of Aegon being the true ruler. But we see the White Hart acknowledge Rhaenyra, and that is a symbol, if not truly mystical and spiritual symbol, of her being the true ruler, the true heir. And it's that scene, seeing that regal animal, like in not charging at her, but recognizing her and acknowledging her in a sense of that mystical, fantastical, that deeply symbolic scene of true, I guess you could say, true royalty, recognizing and respecting true royalty. And if like the other people who were, against Rhaenyra and the whole idea and possibility of a woman ruling would have, discarded that, but people would still have seen that, and there would have been seeds of doubt or acknowledgement of if a man was a true ruler, or the acknowledgement of maybe she is the true ruler, and if the symbol of royalty of our land, of our home, recognizes her, maybe she is a true ruler. Maybe we're wrong about the whole thing about only men should rule, and that if the symbol of royalty recognizes a woman or girl or woman, maybe we're wrong. Of course, sorry about that. I'm doing this with my phone. But that scene I thought was deeply, it was, I think, one of the most important scenes of the film. I don't know how many people talk about it, but seeing that and having that shown, I think, was truly defining, because Rhaenyra is the rightful ruler. She is the rightful heir, the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. But I think that scene maybe gets swept under the rug, because you have other scenes like with like I spoke, like Rhaenyra being declared heir, which still is an important scene. Don't get me wrong, but having that deeply mystical and spiritual scene of the White Hart acknowledging, and I think respecting Rhaenyra, or at least acknowledging and recognizing her, is, to me, maybe the most, I guess you could say, like I said, it's my favorite scene. And I think it's one of the most important, and I guess you could say one of the most underrated scenes of the season. I hope you liked this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be trying to get more videos out as soon as I can, because I had 2 videos in mind for the main film that I've been looking forward to this year, that's coming out next month. I don't know if I'll be doing the first video, in the sense that it will not be the review to it. I'm not certain, because of how certain things are going, and other things I want to review, and we'll do the whole video and image overlay, because that takes a lot of time. Now, I do have other things I want to do, want to review and everything, and I may do the expectation video. I'm just not sure yet. And like I said, I hope you liked this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching.